Hello and welcome to Aligned with Magic. I am your host, Katarina Rose, and I created this podcast to share my thoughts on the topics of personal growth, magic, energy, manifestation, astrology, shamanic and spiritual practices, all those fascinating and mysterious forces shaping our world. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and I hope this episode contributes something really positive to your life and well-being. Without further ado, onto the episode. Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Aligned with Magic. My apologies, I still sound sick. I have been congested. I will elaborate on that in just a little bit. I will expand on that. And yes, I could have waited to record for sure, but I was inspired today. I felt especially driven, guided to do it today. The transiting North Node is conjunct my natal Mercury today. So this feels like a call from above, a call from above or within, I'm not sure, but I definitely feel the pull to do it today, right now. So thank you. Thank you for being part of the first episode with me. On today's episode, I will be reflecting on what's been coming up for me, what's been floating out there for me personally and energetically, and what I'm actually working on and through. First things first, yes, I am getting over a cold, which may be hearable on the podcast, if hearable is even a word. Hopefully it's not too bad to listen to, but it was a very gnarly sinus situation I had going on for about a week, and I was a very powerful, very gross mucus producing machine. Being this sick, having this cold, unexpectedly ended up forcing me into a deep slowdown, which led me to like a total energetic halt. I don't get colds or flu very often, but usually for me, when I do, this is indicative of a burnout. I could not do a lot physically or mentally. My mind was foggy and boggy. It felt like a wet sponge, just saturated and overwhelmed with inflammation. You know that feeling when your mind just feels so dull and sluggish? That's what it felt like. So I could not really think or focus on the things I love to concentrate on. I could not look at astrology, art. I could not read books. Basically, I had to keep things very simple for my brain, as it just did not have enough concentration power. It didn't have the capacity to do anything. And also, to be honest, I didn't really want to. I lacked motivation or drive to even want to engage in these things that I normally love. And it's like nothing groundbreaking. When we feel sick, we kind of go through that. But what's groundbreaking is what I realized during this time. This period of rest, enforced by illness, revealed something important. Although I believed that I was resting when I wasn't actively creating, I was still working through input, like learning, studying, taking in information, formulating new ideas. So even during my so-called periods of rest, I was still in continuous mode of stimulation rather than true rest. So when I was sick recently and my body demanded complete stillness, no output, no input, I experienced severe discomfort, even restlessness or even anxiety to an extent, realizing just how difficult it was for me to simply be and not do anything. This time period really forced me to contemplate how I have been in constant either create or study mode, When I wasn't writing or creating things, I was consuming information. I would be ingesting something. I would be reading books on astrology, magic, energy, whatever, etc. Like researching how to make candles, whatever my random neurodivergent interests would be at the time. Basically being sick and having my brain compromised by a bunch of fluid in my head, it really made me reflect back on all the times when I thought I was resting and I was not at all. And I don't know if I'm actually making myself clear or making any sense. I'm just gonna blame the remaining fluid in my brain and my sinuses on lack of clarity here. My point is that being unable to concentrate and use my brain to study or to do research or to compile ideas really freaked me out, really made me feel useless, like I was wasting my life away because I wasn't being productive. I know this seems obvious now, but until my ass got laid down recently, I really did not clock it. I did not realize I was doing that. Because for me, rest meant not producing something, but it still allowed me to be open to information and inspiration and new sources of knowledge. So when I was resting, I made it into productive rest. I was doing research. I was compiling ideas. And the moment I had to chill and actually rest like a normal person, I got so antsy. I tried to go for a walk, but could not muster a very long one because I had zero physical energy to move myself on my own 2 feet, because my body was fighting an infection and needed rest. It demanded it in order to heal itself. And this was so wild to me because of how much I advocate for honoring rest and giving the body a break through different seasons of our lives and our different cycles that we go through. I am generally such a proponent of rest and honoring the natural cycles within, even when we need to slow down, especially when we need to slow down. And I sure did not anticipate to discover my very own hidden antics of still sneaking in productivity in the form of knowledge gathering. It was so difficult to just be still. No input, no output. This experience really exposed a very subtle form of workaholism for me, and that's why I really wanted to share it today. It had crept in through intellectual consumption and the need to feel productive at all times. Being sick this time around really made me call myself out on the fact that I've been pushing way too hard these past few years without even realizing it. Overworking and not fully letting go. A secret way to feel productive really snuck in for me in the form of the perpetual consumption of information. The insatiable craving to have a constant knowledge flow going, constant inspiration flow even. Because this is the only way I actually felt satisfied with myself, I've come to realize. And I'm not talking social media scrolling, not just checking out mentally. I'm talking intentionally, consistently, and constantly seeking stimulation, storing the fruits of knowledge for later. I've come to realization that I haven't gotten true rest in a really long time, because instead of letting myself be empty, be empty from producing something and be empty from ingesting something, overworking really snuck in the form of the perpetual consumption of information, that insatiable craving to have a constant stream of knowledge flow going so I can feel good about not letting my rest go to waste. But acquisition of knowledge is really not a true form of rest. we really need a time to empty out. We need to give the body what it is asking us to do. If it wants to be quiet, we should give it silence. Pushing it through is just desperate. It's desperation, and it's a needy kind of energy that actually creates more resistance. And this realization became a pivotal point of how I want to reshape and restructure my life in the new year 2026. Which I hope someone listening to this can also take as inspiration and perhaps apply to their lives if they feel moved to do so. I think it's really good to sit down and kind of think what rest means to you and how you go about it, and whether you also have some sneaky little tendencies to keep yourself productive without even realizing it. I really want to incorporate more of actual rest going forward, where I don't produce new things, and when I also do not take in new things. I also want to start incorporating more activities into my life that are here simply for pleasure, for my enjoyment, not for hustle, not for followers or likes, and just because I enjoy doing these things like I once used to. I really just want to move differently this year, and I'm feeling very anti-hustle right now. I really want to make art because I want to make it, and not just because I want to sell prints of it someday eventually, or because that art, that illustration might be useful on my blog or something. I want to share more posts, not just because that's what I think my followers will prefer, but because I really enjoy sharing something with zero strings attached, zero expectations. Which, with the latter, to be fair, I have been doing that, pretty much that. And I can't really post online unless it lights me up. But since I've been getting so little traction on social media, I kind of stopped. I haven't been sharing so much of what lights me up lately because there have been crickets. And I even deleted a bunch of posts because I felt silly talking to myself. But lately, I haven't been caring so much about visibility. I've been caring more about using my voice and sharing that voice, about building community, and hopefully, resonating with people and gathering those people around, because I think community is now so important more than ever. I like using online social media spaces more like a scrapbook, in a way like a diary or an inspiration bank for myself, where I just kind of drop some ideas and go on with my life. Something I can reflect on later, and enjoy seeing where I once was. I really just want to encourage others to do something similar, to take the pressure off yourself and to take breaks from the always on mode. Less hustle in 2026. More magnetism, right? I sense that as a collective, we're kind of burned out of always trying to turn our hobby or interest into a side hustle. If you love making birdhouses, it doesn't mean that you have to sell them and start a side business selling your birdhouses. You sure can, but maybe you want to make them just because you love to do it. Because there's joy in the process, pleasure in just being creative and discovering just how good it feels to create something again. That process of discovery. But we're so pressured to monetize every single little thing we do, leaving nothing for ourselves. There's almost a kind of guilt, and I admit that I totally have that very, very quality I'm speaking of right now, that there's guilt around not capitalizing on something you're good at or enjoy doing, that's not your 9 to 5. And it's totally okay to say no. It's okay to keep something sacred for yourself. I think we're in that stage of capitalism where everything has become so transactional, including our hobbies and interests. And with the expense of living plus the ease of actually starting a business now, we all have these tools and marketing available to us. It's never been easier, and also never been more in need of that extra income. So I can understand why we got here. But it doesn't mean that we absolutely have to do it. Not everything has to be for sale. I don't care what Elon Musk says. And not everything has to be a side hustle. So this is one of my major shifts this year. I am keeping some things for myself just for fun. It's like I am walking backwards into my past when I actually did things for passion, more for the discovery of it. I'm not saying that I don't do things that I love. I do. It's just I always want to do something I love and get something out of it. And get a like. And I want to share it with people. And I want to interact with someone. I want to engage. But there was a time when I did not feel as much pressure to be good at something and then to offer it for public consumption. And if I do make something for myself, if I doodle in my sketchbook, I almost feel guilty because I'm not using this time to propel my business forward, or learning something to better myself as an artist, as an astrologer or a spiritual practitioner. There's always this drive, this hunger to either make or take. I want a slower life in 2026, and I want to enjoy creating without guilt and allow myself to rest without ingesting. All of these thoughts and reflections evolved further as I was brainstorming this episode, and I was thinking about what I will be talking about today. Making things for pleasure and not for hustle kind of naturally led me into thinking about how I show up on social media and the content I produce. Because it's kind of a part of the same creative process. I make videos, I make a lot of graphics, sometimes I write, I research and take a lot of notes, which sometimes end up on my social media accounts as some sort of content. And something happens when you do put yourself out there, even if it's not intended to sell or market. When you genuinely put yourself out there because you want to share with the world, you want eyes to see it, you want people to have a response to it, but then no one interacts, not one soul, or the post gets very low views, or like no interactions, no comments, or something very, very sparse. It is really difficult to not internalize this lack of engagement as negative feedback, right? When I was producing art, like a lot of art back in the day, I don't produce nearly as much currently, and I was sharing it online or in the galleries. I can't lie, lack of people pausing mid their scroll to like or comment was taken as my art must not be good enough, that it's not worth putting it online or sharing in any way. I definitely grew past that in regards to my art and genuinely came to love myself as an artist without relying on the outside feedback to build my self-worth and confidence as an artist. And there was definitely a period, I am kind of still in that period, when I would talk to myself on Instagram, on Threads, Substack with like zero interaction. No likes, no follows, no comments. And I was like, huh, interesting. My brain immediately ran to the narrative. Nobody cares what you have to say. Nobody cares. Or you have nothing to offer to the world. And that's been a favorite rhetoric of my shadow brain for years, like decades actually, which really does go back to my childhood, rooted back to the times of, quite abandonment and isolation from adults for various reasons. I won't get into that now, but maybe another time. But what lives inside of me, all of us, on the subconscious level, tends to reflect externally into adulthood. So when I encountered this exact dynamic in my adult life, the dynamic of being or feeling invisible, I was not surprised, especially after learning about how energy works, how our subconscious works, how there's an exchange of resonance, how the reality mirrors our subconscious patterns, our wounding, our subconscious beliefs, our self-worth, or levels of self-worth. This dynamic of standing before a crowd, before my peers, and not being seen or heard is actually reflected in my natal chart via my Chiron in Gemini in the 11th house, which honestly, thank goodness for astrology, really made me understand the pain and hurt behind it all, and also how to work with it. If you're not familiar, Chiron in Gemini is about pain around expression. You might also have it. You just gotta run your natal chart. So check your chart. If you do have Chiron in Gemini, it could show up as not feeling heard, not feeling understood, not being able to convey ideas in the way you conceive them in your head. Like it makes sense in your head, but the words don't come out right. There could be issues around speaking, or maybe even learning disorders. A lot of people with Chiron and Gemini also think of themselves as being unintelligent. And for me, my Chiron being in the 11th house of community, peers, hopes and dreams, it is about the pain of not belonging. It's about being rejected by the group for your ideas or the way you speak your ideas. It's about not being heard by your community. Kind of like speaking and no one listens. I can't even tell you how many times I would speak up in class or a meeting or even a friend group and would be completely ignored, only for someone else to say that exact thing, that exact idea out loud, not even 5 minutes later. And of course, everyone would absolutely love their idea, even though it was the exact same one. I also can't tell you how many times my original idea or ideas have been stolen or repackaged by someone else as their own, even by the people close to me whom I considered friends. And this is actually not an unusual feature for Chiron and Gemini. I've seen this play out not just with me, but with other carriers of this Chiron. It's a pattern, it's a pattern, and it's a very prominent pattern for some people in their charts. It really depends on how Chiron is positioned and how it is interacting with other elements in the chart. I know it sounds like I'm rambling, and I kind of am, for sure, but it does tie into the first half of this episode, where I talk about the need, that innate drive for consumption of mental food, for the need to have mental productivity even when we're supposed to be resting. And this does tie into Chiron and Gemini, which can be insatiable when it comes to knowledge accumulation. always thinking that it doesn't have enough. Chiron in Gemini is hungry for knowledge because it feels a lack. Wherever your Chiron is, if it is prominently wounded in your chart, its wound may show up as a lack in the sign and house that the Chiron is in. So my Chiron is in Gemini. I'll feel a lack of knowledge. I'll feel a lack of information. I feel like a perpetual student, never have enough information. I am always studying because I feel like there's always more to learn. And it's good, but up to a point. Someday I have to kind of stop if I want to share what I've learned with others and transition into a role of a teacher in some aspects, and that's okay. But Chiron and Gemini might feel insecure about doing that. I'm just kind of showing you some of the potentials in the way it can manifest. So Chiron and Taurus, the person can feel like they need to accumulate a lot of material things, a lot of fancier items, brand name purses or shoes. Sometimes it's something about their appearance, like it's a lack. They feel like they don't have enough of that thing. And from the sign that the Chiron is in, Chiron in Libra can show up as someone not having a relationship. They can feel like a severe lack in that area. So a person could jump from a relationship to a relationship, always feeling insatiable in that department. You get the idea. I'm actually planning on releasing more future episodes that go in greater detail on Chiron, so please stay tuned if this is something that interests you. I really do highly recommend anyone listening to look into their natal Chiron. Chiron will tell you quite the story. It is a very worthwhile and fascinating archetype to explore, for sure. Not every Chiron is going to be extremely painful. I have definitely seen some charts and worked with some people for whom Chiron ended up being not that big of a deal, quite frankly. So it really just depends. I think understanding Chiron can make a profound change in your life. Understanding astrology in general, because it helps us shift our understanding of all the internal psychological and energetic mechanisms behind what we do, the patterns that play out in our lives, things that we go through sometimes. Well, it has given me some very major shifts in perspectives and deeper understanding of the evolutionary journey that I am going through in this lifetime. There is something about seeing it all on paper too, very precisely described, using the celestial language, using the symbols of the stars, the natal chart. I love it. I love the language of astrology. And this podcast essentially comes from that space of contemplation, and definitely from my Chiron in Gemini, which is at the very apex of a crazy yod formation in my chart. What I'm doing here is a part of my self-healing journey, where I practice sharing my voice. I like how my voice kind of like cracks and ebbs and flows as I try to be all heartfelt. But I'm really doing this for the pure joy of it, because I really want to. I want to share what I learn as I learn it, and I really wish to connect with others who resonate with this path. And hopefully, this podcast can also help those who are on their own self-healing journey. Maybe it will offer someone some comfort, a sense of safety, a sense of belonging, just warm fuzzies, you know? Maybe some food for thought, to share a collective experience here on Earth, to connect via resonance, to cut through the noise, to slow down, to realign with things that are simpler, more authentic, and infinitely more magical. And sometimes you just need a friendly voice to put you to sleep. If that's the case, I'm glad you're getting something out of it. Sweet dreams, my sweet. I'm not offended. If my voice helps you in some way, then that's wonderful. I'm here for it. Well, I think that's it. That is it for episode 1. We're going to wrap this up. You can find me on alignedwithmagic.com. I am on a bunch of different social media platforms. It's at Aligned with Magic across multiple platforms. Same handle on Instagram, TikTok, Substack. I'm not sure about Substack. I think on Substack it's just Aligned with Magic, but for some reason it's really difficult to search. Like, it never shows up. Whatever, no one's looking for me on Substack. I'm not concerned. I'll just post some links in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me, and I cannot wait to see where this goes from here. I hope 2026 finds you extremely well. I hope you feel good. May all of your dreams come true. Until next time. Bye.